Alright, we're back. Hopefully this works. Now we're going to be watching Tucker. May have a few comments on it. Let's get started.
Of all the effects of the current conflict in the Middle East, one we can be certain of at this point is that there are going to be a lot of refugees, hundreds of thousands, possibly millions. Where should they go? That's a real question. So if you were to suggest, well, why doesn't Israel take them in? It's their war. The response you would get would be immediate, and it would be aggressive, and it would be, of course not, that's insane. These people are dangerous. If they were moved to Israel, it would be destabilizing for that country. And that's probably true. In fact, it's certainly true. But what's interesting is the very same people who would tell you that are now pushing for those refugees to be sent to the West, to English-speaking countries, Scotland, the UK, and yes, the United States. Calls for this are coming from the left, predictably, but also from the so-called right. We should take these refugees. What's going on here? And is anyone pushing back against it? Well, Nigel Farage is the head of the UK Independence Party, joins us now with an update on where this conversation is going. Nigel, thank you so much for coming on. So it's a little strange that the very people who acknowledge that this would be a massive threat to Israel, and they're absolutely right, by the way, I'm not calling for Israel to take these refugees, but those same people are saying the UK and the US and Scotland should take them. What's the thinking here?
I mean, we have a great history in the UK of taking refugees. You can go back 300 years to the Protestants in France who were being burnt at the stake, and we took in a large number of French Protestants, Huguenots as they were known, and they did very, very well in commerce, finance, the military in our country. The same applies to Jewish people. We took Jews in from Russia after the pogroms at the start of the 20th century. We took Jewish people in from Germany and Austria in the 1930s. And indeed, if you go to the 1970s, we took quite a large number of people from Uganda, where Idi Amin threatened to annihilate the Asian population there. And again, they were a group that came to the country, assimilated, did incredibly well. So, we feel as a country with our Christian roots, and our desire to help those in genuine need, that we should try and help people. But remember that the duty of any government, its primary duty, is to the integrity of its own country and its citizens. Now, over the course of the last 6-7 years, we've taken over 500,000 legal refugees. They've come to us from Hong Kong, our former colony, being oppressed by the Chinese Communist Party. They've come to us from Afghanistan. They've come to us from Syria. They've come to us, of course, from Ukraine. The big problem here is that Hamas, the terrorist group Hamas, although the BBC will never call them terrorists, but the Hamas who launched those appalling, barbaric attacks on everything down to babies on October the 7th, they enjoy considerable support in Gaza. Indeed, the last elections that were fought in Gaza a few years ago, Hamas came top of the poll. So if you take any significant number from Gaza into our country, you will have a significant percentage of Hamas sympathizers and supporters among them. And you have to ask, given the protests we've seen on the streets of London just this weekend and the weekend before, whether maybe we've got enough of a problem in this country already. And we've had successive waves of Islamic extremist terrorism on our streets. There's a case going on right at the moment from somebody who was killed just a couple of weeks ago. The authorities do their best to suppress all of these stories. So my argument, and I'm pretty much alone in this, is that if we take people from Gaza, they will actually pose, some of them, enough of them, will pose a threat to our national security. And if anyone should take them, Tucker, shouldn't it be the Egyptians? Shouldn't it be the Saudis? Shouldn't it be their co-religionists in that part of the world? And how interesting that Saudi Arabia didn't take a single person from Syria because they were worried of the impact it would have on Saudi society.
Right.
And the same goes for Egypt right
Crazy
now.
facts
So if
there.
they won't take them, why on earth should we threaten national security?
But I want to go back.
I gotta stop it here for a second because it just sounds like a plan. Like they just want to bring in people here instead of their neighboring countries. I mean, it seems like, you know, if you were the same belief, same religion, Islam, that you would be like, okay, I'll take Islamic refugees for sure. You know, so it really doesn't make sense unless it's, you know, a plan.
Back to something you said at the beginning, that the English feel good about themselves because as a Christian country, and it is still, I think, officially a Christian country, though it's obviously not, but it is technically a Christian country. They feel good because they're expressing Christian charity in receiving all these refugees. But has that policy made England better? Is it a more cohesive, happier country than it was 40 years ago? It doesn't seem to be at all.
No, I mean, you know, we have now got, and our London Metropolitan Police don't know what to do. We had people on the streets of London this Saturday shouting jihad. People on the streets of London carrying ISIS banners, chanting.
And if you know anything about jihad, it's bad for anybody that's not Muslim, not a follower of Islam. It's like they had the creed for Hamas. Basically, it's kill, convert, or enslave. And what's crazy is like, out of this entire world right now, these are places that still have slavery today. Look it up.
Going on the streets of London, from Palestine to the sea, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, meaning Israel should be literally obliterated. So we now have the politics of other countries on our streets because of who we've let in. This group of people have not assimilated. They have not integrated. And therefore, why compound the problem? Historically, it's been a success, but in modern times, it is now dividing our society. It is threatening our way of life. It is threatening our free speech. It's happening here. I mean, look at Germany. Look at Germany. Can you believe that in Germany, of all countries in the last week, Jewish people in Berlin have had Stars of David graffitied on their front doors? So you can see all over the West, this is a massive problem, and it's not one from which America is immune.
It's interesting that no one ever says, well, China's got the fastest growing economy in the world. They have an obligation to take in millions of refugees from other countries. Nobody ever says that. Nobody says that about the Gulf states.
Why?
It's only Christian countries that have this obligation. And I think it's obviously destroyed those countries. Germany, I mean, people are getting raped in Germany on the street long before the Hamas attacks of October 7th. This is a long-standing problem. So, but why do you think that is? Why do you think that prosperous Christian countries in the West have this obligation that every other country, India, China, Saudi, they're all exempt from it? What is that?
Yeah, and I mean, take Japan. You know, Japan, a fully functioning modern democracy, but Japan, of course, takes hardly anybody. In fact, even on legal immigration, Japan is very strict and very tight because they want to protect the integrity of their culture and their country. Why?
As all cultures should.
Partly guilt. I think the older countries seem to be absolutely infused with guilt about their colonial past. But also...
Wait a second. Japan was one of the most aggressive colonial powers in history. But no one's pushing them. Why? I mean, I'm not a conspiracy nut, but it does seem like this is an effort to destroy certain kinds of countries. And of course, it's worked.
Yeah.
Why not just say that?
We have allowed the virus of Marxism to take hold in our countries. We're being told to be ashamed of our histories. We're being told that we're institutionally racist. We're being told that we suffer, you know, from our own form of bias, and we indoctrinate our school kids with this stuff. And the reason this neo-Marxist agenda has taken such hold in Britain, Europe, and indeed in much of America too, is actually not because of the left, it's because the conservatives in those countries have not had the courage to stand up to this stuff. And, you look at my country, we're being told we should be ashamed of slavery. Do you know, we spent nearly 50 years using the Royal Navy at massive cost, stamping out slavery, stopping the rest of Europe carrying out slavery.
Yeah, England, Great Britain, first country to abolish slavery and make it illegal, followed by America. That's the point I was trying to make earlier about slavery still existing in a lot of these countries today. You know, it is what it is, but most of the predominantly white countries have abolished slavery and made it illegal. Now you go to places in the Middle East, all the way into Africa, they have more slaves today than when slavery was legal in Great Britain and America. Like, you really should go check out the movie Sound of Freedom. It's crazy. It's based on true. I mean, it is true. They got the footage of the actual footage of what they were doing at the end of the movie, so you can see it. It's crazy, man. Go check it out.
Slavery. But nobody ever comes up with those arguments. Conservative cowardice through politics and media has led to so very much of this.
Well, Britain
But I think
ended
a
the
moment of
transatlantic
awakening-
slave trade.
I think a moment of awakening is coming.
Well, so your own prime minister, who is a conservative, but obviously has zero interest in the country that he supposedly runs, for example, that's very obvious as an American looking across. His new priority is ending tobacco use in a country with a massive narcotics problem and a massive refugee problem and an economy based on what, banking or something that's falling apart. Why is he focused on tobacco? I'm confused.
Do not for one moment please make the mistake of thinking the party that is now in power in my country and has been there for 13 years has anything to do with being conservative. They're not. We have the highest tax burden we've had since 1951, when we were busy paying off wartime debts. We have the growth of a surveillance society that punishes the innocent and never the genuinely guilty. We have legislation to control our lives at every level. We've just put up corporation tax by...
Dude, that reminds me of a video I just watched on YouTube. This mom was begging the police to arrest her son. He's constantly stealing cars, breaking into stuff, doing all sorts of bad stuff. And the mom straight up begged the police to just lock him up. He needs to learn his lesson. And they just keep bringing him home. And she's like, what? How am I? I'm trying my best and I need help and nobody's there to help. And, you know, this kid could end up, you know, getting shot, murdered in some bad ways, maybe even killing somebody else. You know, I got to take responsibility for our actions, and we got to help when it's needed all the way around, whether it's feeding somebody, clothing somebody, or disciplining somebody. I mean, we got to have discipline. We can't have anarchy. Anarchy leads to mob rule. Mob rule is a bad thing, man. It means if they want your stuff, they take your stuff. You don't have no rights whatsoever.
By 30%, to damage every man and woman running a small business that wanted to reinvest and grow in this country. And despite Brexit, we still have not lifted the regulatory burden, which of course supports the big corporates, but damages the entrepreneurs. And for Sunak, 1 year on from an election, to decide his main priorities were to stop anybody after 2009 buying cigarettes, whilst we have a massive, massive problem with drugs causing huge short-term damage to our youngsters. Oh, and the other thing is to fiddle around with the A-levels that 18-year-olds do. Neither of those two things would have been on the top 25 priorities of almost anybody in our country. And that's why we're headed next year in this country for a dramatic, dramatic collapse of Conservative support in the general election. And you know what? Not only will they lose the election, they deserve to lose it.
Yeah, I mean, I would support someone from the hard left who actually cared about England over Sunak, who clearly despises the country that he runs. But I just want to zero in on this question of tobacco. So it's impossible to imagine him saying cannabis use has massive side effects. It's not helping our country at all, and we're going to phase it out. That would be inconceivable. But tobacco use, which...
All right, I'm going to pause there. And, you know, I have different beliefs on cannabis use. I believe there's definitely medicinal. There's definitely, like, it's good for ADHD It's good for a lot of people who have one of those minds that just race. So I think there's a lot of medicinal reasons for it. Tobacco, on the other hand, I stopped smoking October of last year, so it's been just over a year for me. I don't smoke cigarettes anymore. I did use vapes to help me stop, but you know what? Greatest thing I ever did. I can breathe. Thank God for it. Anyway, I just had to put that out there.
Has long-term bad health consequences, true, but also raises testosterone levels. That's the threat? Like, how is that the threat?
No, I mean, it's absolutely wide of the mark. And yeah, you're right. Tobacco causes long-term potential problems, but it doesn't actually cause short-term problems. Drugs cause psychological short-term problems, absolutely deleterious to our younger generation.
Yeah.
But he sidestepped the big issue, went for what he thought was the easy one. And look, you know, everywhere we see the growth of big government that wants to control every aspect.
Yeah, we gotta get a handle on that big government trying to control everything. You gotta think we're taxed on everything so many times. You're taxed on your paychecks, you're taxed on what you buy, you're taxed on your home, you're taxed on your cars. You gotta pay licensing fees, you gotta pay insurance. Literally, the government forces you to purchase a product from a third party. It's just, it's nonsensical. It's just causes so many people to be in poverty. It's ridiculous. I mean, if we had more rights and less government, we'd have less people in poverty.
Of our
Yeah.
lives, and it's all irrelevant. You know, our national debt, I mean, our debt interest payment is massive, just as it is in the USA. Our entrepreneurship is falling. Our levels of national security through failed immigration leave us more vulnerable to internal terrorist attack than ever before. I mean, it's almost unbelievable that banning cigarettes for anybody born after 2009 could even be seen to be a priority.
Like we're adults, okay? We can go serve in the military and die, but they want to tell you you can't smoke a cigarette in the privacy of your own space. You can't, like, man, there's something seriously wrong when it's okay to go die for your country in a war over, we could even say war over oil, war over the poppy plants, the war over, all these different things, territories, but you can't smoke a cigarette. I mean, again, I quit, but I feel like as an adult, you have the right to choose. So, I'm one of those, I'm kind of pro-choice and pro-life at the same time. I know it doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but I don't have the right to make your choice for you. But I do have the right to have my own belief. I can feel like something's wrong, but still say, hey, it's your choice to do it. You have to live with it. As long as it's not affecting everybody around you and me in some way that we can't turn away from or walk away from, so be it. Do what you got to do. But, to dictate to people what they are allowed to believe, think, it's just, it's asinine.
Countries that hate themselves have trouble continuing, I would say, and I hope that both of ours change course. Nigel Farage, I so appreciate talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Younger people say the news is full of lies.
In Kennedy's motorcade.
239 female cell death of Jeffrey Epstein.
All right, man, that was interesting video there. You guys want me to do more Tucker reactions? Get it down there in the comment section. Let me know. I'll go back and watch, and we'll react, and we'll have a conversation about it. All right.